Hi, everyone. Thank you, Em. You're the Lizzie McGuire to my Lizzie McGuire. If you were here 2023, she and I did a talk together. But so this is Kelly Kapoor from The Office. And I can tell you that in my 20s, when I was a little baby SRE, I was basically the only incident commander on call. And some people here will know we used to call them Masters of Disaster, which I hate that name. I think it's so dumb. But yeah, I was basically the only IC on call at my company and the only one running postmortems, which meant that whenever something serious broke in production, nights, weekends, holidays, whatever it was, the page came to me. And at the time, I thought that this was a good thing, right? I thought it meant that I was really good at incidents. And it really didn't bother me that much. I was pretty young, I had no responsibilities. Beyonce hadn't asked me for help with her twins yet. And really, I could handle incidents while like watching The Bachelor or like at the beach. So it was really fun. Looking back though now, I realized that something different was happening. While I was proud of my ability to point out single points of failure and call out whenever systems needed to be highly available, I wasn't really practicing what I was preaching. I was the single point of failure. And so at one point I started looking like Kelly Kapoor here, and I realized that we needed to get out of this hole. But doing that was not easy, because incident command is not a purely technical role. It is a sociotechnical leadership role. And we don't really know how to hire for this. And so this was about 10 years ago, and like I mentioned, for a long time, our systems depending on one person holding it together, which is not sustainable. It's not sustainable for our organization, and it's not sustainable for the person that's doing this. But today, I look like this. So today, the incident response system looks very different. This was after a lot of iteration, a lot of learning the hard way, and we now have a dedicated team of trained incident commanders. There's a big light here, so if I look weird, that's why. So instead of just having one person holding the pager all the time, we share the responsibility across a group of people who are specifically trained for it. And that change made a huge difference. Incidents became calmer, communications clear, and the responsibility doesn't fall on just one person. So we were able to build a sustainable system for incident command. Getting there took time because we had to rethink what the incident commander role was actually about. And you may have experienced this. I have seen this. Many organizations, they come in, they introduce the IC role with the best of intentions, but then maybe they choose the wrong people for the role. Maybe they misunderstand the skill set. Maybe they don't train incident commanders intentionally. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to talk about why the incident commander role is often so misunderstood, the anti-patterns I have seen at organizations when choosing incident commanders, the 3 competencies that I believe actually make somebody really, really great at this role, and how you can identify and develop incident commanders inside your organizations. Because I really do believe that most teams already have people who can be excellent incident commanders. We just haven't recognized them yet. Or if you have to go in and look at the outside, we have no idea what to look for. So this is where I do my little intro. Even though Em did a really great intro, thank you so much. So I'm Vanessa, and I spend a ton of time thinking about incidents. I just really love talking about incidents. So I work at Enova on incidents. I'm also in the board for the Resiliency and Software Foundation. We have a happy hour later tonight if you want to join us. So yeah, I spend a lot of time thinking about what happens when things go sideways. And why can I talk about this? Because I've done it, right? For the past decade, I have lived and breathed incidents. I have been the sole incident commander on call, like I mentioned. I have built and scaled escalation and reporting programs. I've trained responders. I've led retrospectives and trained people how to do them. And I have seen incident management evolve across many different organizations, not just at where I'm at now, but I did take a little Rumspringa where I worked with many people at different organizations. So I've had a front row seat to see how everybody does this differently. And then outside of work, I do have twin preschoolers, which is also incident commanding, in my opinion. I just have to give them more snacks and potty breaks. Or maybe the same amount of snacks and potty breaks. All right, so I was going to explain what sociotechnical system is, but then Andrew already talked about this. But so yeah, incident response is, I think, a sociotechnical problem. But sociotechnical is one of the words that we say a lot in conferences like these, reliability words, engineering rules. But we often forget to explain what we actually mean by that. So when I say sociotechnical issues with incidents, an incident will often start as a technical failure, right? You will have a database that's overloaded. You will have a deployment that introduced a bug. Maybe you'll have a dependency service that is failing, so now you're shut out of luck. But your incident is not going to stay purely technical. Quickly, it's going to become an organizational event. Quickly, you're going to declare your incident, and you're going to have tons of people join Slack or Zoom or whatever it is, and they're going to be investigating different parts of your system. You're going to have different engineers proposing different strategies. You're going to have your leaders being like, hey, what's going on? Give me an update. And then you have the people who actually work with your customers, and they're like, I need to tell these people something. So it's a lot of people. And then you have to understand how we got to where we are today, right? Because what we're dealing with today, maybe it's because of a decision that a human being made 10 years ago based on constraints that they had back then. And so at that point, you're not just debugging software. You're coordinating a group of actual human beings who are interacting with complex systems under pressure. And so when you're in an incident, there's more than one system, right? You have your technical system, your services, your infrastructure, your code, dependencies, blah, blah, blah. And you have the human coordination system. So basically, I am this person. You have how teams are sharing information, how they're making decisions, how they're coordinating the investigation. And the outcome of the incident process depends on how these systems actually behave. So once we understand that our systems involve not just a technical system, but also that like socio-human coordination, we have a new challenge. Because we can have failures in both systems. Even if your technical failure is pretty easy, pretty straightforward, right? Like let's just revert, we're good. Your incident can actually spiral if the coordination system breaks down. Like I mentioned, you can have tons of engineers join in, and maybe you realize that you have 2 engineers who are spending 1 hour debugging the same thing. Or maybe you have one person who's deploying a mitigation while somebody else is still trying to understand what the heck is going on. Or my favorite one, which Michelle actually mentioned this yesterday, is you can have 3, 4, 5 different engineers have a completely different understanding of what's happening in your system, right? I'm an SRE. I think about how my system is operating. If I'm working with customers, and there was a time when I was working with customers, you think about it completely different. And so this is where your incident commander, Olivia Pope, becomes really critical, because they are helping make sure that the problem gets solved efficiently. They are stabilizing the response by coordinating people, information, and decisions so that your engineers can focus on their system, on what they do best, on fixing them. And the best analogy that I've heard, I've actually stolen it from Mem over here, is that incident command is more like an orchestra conductor. And Colette, you'll call me out because I don't know anything about orchestra, but I did read a romance novel about musicians the other day. So what I understand is that the conductor does not play every instrument. They may not be the best violinist, but that their job is to make sure that the musicians are staying coordinated, that the tempo is consistent, that the performance works as a whole. Is that correct? Thank you. Okay, so I think that incident commanders do the same thing. So they're not the hero engineer that's fixing production. They're not the boss. They're the person making sure that everyone can work effectively. And I think one day I'm going to write a romance novel about incident commanders. All right. So how does the conductor actually stabilize a response? I think the role sits at the intersection of 3 domains: people, system, and businesses. So for people, during an incident, well, maybe once AI takes over our jobs, that'll be different. But right now, we're still dealing with people. And so you've got your engineers that are under stress, and Slack is filling up, and you've got a bunch of threads with like 50 comments each, and nobody knows what's looking at what. And so the incident commander's job is to coordinate the humans in the system. They're being like, hey, who's working on what? Why are you and you doing the same thing separately? Like, work together. Do we have the right people involved? Who do we need to call? They're managing the attention and the energy of people during this high stress moment. Then when it comes to the system, like I mentioned, everyone sees the system differently, right? Like you've got people looking at logs, infrastructure, customer impact. And so as an IC, I have to connect those different perspectives into a shared understanding of what's really happening. And so what I'm doing is I'm summarizing things, right? Like this is what I'm seeing, this is what that means, et cetera, et cetera. And so I've said this before, you don't need to be the strongest engineer in the room, but you do need to have enough system understanding to be able to connect the dots, right? To be able to say like, oh, this is what we're testing next. And then finally, and this is the thing that we forget about quite a bit in engineering roles, is the business. And you know, we're in an incident and engineers are focused on like debugging and trying to figure out what's up. And then leadership, they don't care about like Terraform or Kubernetes or whatever the heck that is, right? Like how many customers are impacted? You know, when is this going to be resolved? And so a strong incident commander needs to understand what matters to the business that they operate in. So for example, I work in fintech. Things like bank files are really, really, really important. I need to know it in my brain that if bank files are involved, that's a big deal. Regulatory workflows. Those things immediately change how we prioritize incidents. Now, I'm not a lawyer. I don't need to know how these like regulatory things work, but I need to know that those are important. Because part of the IC's job is translating between the technical reality of the system and the expectations from the business side. And when you do that well, then you're maintaining confidence in an uncertain time. So, how do we find good incident commanders? So first I want to talk about what you shouldn't do. And this is what I've seen at many organizations. I've certainly done this before. I've seen many organizations fall into predictable anti-patterns when choosing incident commanders. So the first one is saying like, okay, the strongest engineer is going to be the incident commander, right? Like you got Gaston here. And this creates an immediate problem because now you have your best technical expert focusing on coordinating people, on answering leadership questions, on writing updates, on managing the timeline, and not debugging the system. So you have removed your best investigator from your investigation. That's one problem. The second anti-pattern is when you're like, okay, anyone who's on call is going to be the incident commander, right? Like call me, beep me when you want to reach me. Thank you for laughing at that one. So this usually happens when incident command is treated as a procedural responsibility rather than an actual skill. But incident command is, you need skills. You need to be able to like communicate under pressure and prioritize and facilitate decision making. And not everybody has practiced those skills. So expecting anyone who is on call to just be able to go ahead and do it right away is a disservice, and it can create serious coordination problems. And then finally, we have this idea that whoever is the most senior person or whoever is like the most highest in the chain, like the manager, the super manager, is going to be the incident commander. And so there's two problems with that. Number one is that people are scared sometimes of the most senior person or the most senior manager. And so that's going to impact how you handle an incident. The other issue that I see is that very senior engineers have very strong opinions about technical solutions. Very senior managers have very strong opinions about organizational solutions. So that can then unintentionally move your IC role from coordinator to just dictator. So the IC really should be facilitating the investigation rather than dominating it. I'm not saying that we should never have these people be the IC, right? Like I think Kim Possible would make a really, really good incident commander. I think Gaston would make a terrible incident commander. He would be throwing up because he eats a lot of raw eggs. What I'm saying is that we shouldn't just choose all of this willy-nilly. All right, so if strong incident commanders are not defined by technical expertise, what should we be looking out for? We should look for somebody who can handle the challenges of a high-stakes scenario regardless of their role in their organization. So that's a lot of like wishy-washy stuff, right? But I look for three competencies: communication, sociotechnical leadership, and cognitive load management. And I don't want us to just find one person who can do this. I want us to find a group that can then share this responsibility all together. But first, another detour is, how do you convince your leadership that you should do this? And I've done this, right? It's hard to go to leadership and say like, hey, we've got all these people, but like we really need to invest in like an IC program. And usually abstract arguments rarely work. Like I love everyone here, and I would love to give my execs like all these PDFs, that people send out, or all the talks that have been here. I completely agree with all of them. But sometimes you just have to play the game if you want to get your way. So these are the things that I have done. I know you guys are laughing at me now. Yeah, anyways. So what tends to resonate is evidence. So a few of the things that I have done, people might hate me for this, but the cost of uncoordinated events. And I'm not saying that like every 10 minutes that you're down, you lose $2 million. I mean, just simply letting people know like, hey, whenever we have an incident, that's like 10 to 12 engineers who are like working on this for 4 hours. Because sometimes people don't know this. They just see like, shit, everything is down and now things are back up. But they don't realize like what's actually happening during that time. And making people aware of this makes a difference. Another powerful technique is comparing incidents where you had good coordination versus the ones where you didn't. And then you can show things like communication clarity or stakeholder escalations, or even the dreaded, how long it took us to get back to normal. And this one is like a little bit iffy, but sometimes having good incident command can help coordinate in a way that we are able to get back to normal faster. So I was able to do this once with my group here. We were able to present 2 incidents that had very, very similar triggers, but they went very differently. Because we had good incident command, we were able to understand the incident much more quickly. Our leadership was aware of what was happening, so they felt confident that we got it. And our customers were happy because they felt like they could trust us. All of that because of the investment in incident command as an actual valuable role. And then finally is about starting small. So you don't need to go ahead and be like, give me 5 headcounts. You can start small with a pilot group, train them, demonstrate the value, get some feedback from people, and then see where it goes. My team didn't start big. I was hired to do this and data analysis and a bunch of other stuff. So I think that the combination of like data and concrete incident stories can really help translate an abstract idea into something that leadership will want to invest in. All right, so what's next? What we eventually learn is that a sustainable incident response really comes to these 3 things: choosing your right team structure, choosing your right people, and training them. Team structure. So different organizations are going to handle incident command in different ways. There's not a single perfect model, but there does need to be a deliberate structure. Because without your structure, then incident command is going to become something that you do as an extra, and it's going to, it's not gonna work out. It's gonna lead to burnout. Then you've got choosing the right people for the role. And we talked about this earlier, right? It's not about finding the right engineers, it's about finding the people who can communicate, who can coordinate, who can maintain the situational awareness. And while those skills do exist in many engineering organizations, we overlook them because they don't show up in our traditional like engineering performance metrics, right? It's not part of like our rubrics. And then finally, it's about training. So you just can't assign somebody to become the IC and expect them to be great at it immediately. Like I said, incident command is a skill, so we have to create the right environment for people to develop that skill. It also means accepting that sometimes your incident commanders are not going to be perfect from the very beginning, and you're gonna have to figure out when that is okay, because the goal is not perfection, the goal is to build capacity over time. So when those three things come together, then you stop trying to be the hero, you just try to do something that's sustainable. So let's talk about team structure. So like I mentioned, incident command is not just a skill that individuals have, it's a system that you need to design intentionally. And something that I have learned over the years is that there's not a single best structure. there's also not a single best structure that's going to work for you forever, right? Like your organization is going to change throughout the years. So different organizations are going to choose different models depending on things like your company size, your team structure, how your systems are architected, and how often you have incidents. Like that makes a huge difference. But I have seen some common patterns, so I'm gonna go through them. The first one is the idea of a deliberate incident command team, and this is my favorite because this is what we do. So this is a small group of people whose explicit responsibility is to be the incident commanders during a major incident. And they can come from different engineering teams, they can be in a central team that's just ICs. Regardless, the common goal is that they coordinate incidents across your entire organization. There's some strong advantages to this. It allows you to train for this intentionally. You know who your incident commanders is, so you spend the time doing simulations, doing shadowing, training them on how to do communication, doing incident reviews, all of that stuff. So what you're doing is you're building institutional experience, building expertise, some would say. And then the people who are running these incidents become really good at it, right? Because the more you run incidents, the better you get at it, the better you get at managing uncertainty, and you get comfortable coordinating like large groups of people. The one trade-off is that you do need like the Goldilocks amount of people so that you're not overloading them, but you're also giving them enough incidents that they get good at it. And the organization needs to recognize that this is part of their formal responsibilities. The second one is when you have an incident commander group for each service or for each domain team. So here, if I'm part of the team, I have been trained to run my incidents, the ones that I own. And that works really well when you have systems that are very like highly distributed or where we have strong ownership boundaries. And so the advantage here is that you have really good context around your service and around your team dynamics, right? You know who's the expert, you know what goes with what. And that can really help with coordination, can make it a lot easier. Two challenges though. One is consistency. So if each team is developing their incident command practices independently, then some may do it well, some may do it not as well. So if you go this way, I recommend that you focus on shared training, shared guidelines, and shared incident tooling. The other thing that I think is important to highlight is complex systems, right? Like how often do we really have teams that have such strong ownership balance? It's very rare that we're going to have incidents where you're not touching a different part of the system. And then finally, it's a short Jan, because I don't love this one, it's when you ask for volunteers. Anyone can volunteer. And I can see where this works, right? It helps spread the skills. This is when you want to kind of like democratize the idea of incident commanding or like actually handling incidents. It strengthens that culture of shared responsibility. I think it's very stressful. I think you need a lot of strong support to make this happen. You're gonna have people with very different levels of experience. So if you do go this way, like come up with very clear playbooks, strong documentation, some sort of mentorship program, which might be hard again because everybody is volunteering. So I don't love this because I think that the experience can be inconsistent and it can be stressful for the people who actually are volunteering, and then eventually nobody wants to actually volunteer. So across all of these models, I think that there's one principle that actually matters. Regardless of the structure that you choose, the people who are doing the IC work needs to know that this is a priority. It can't be something that they do on top of their actual work. It needs to be their actual work. It needs to be part of their real job. Because you need attention to do all of this, right? Decision-making, communication, leadership under pressure, all of that requires your attention. And so if you feel like you're squeezing this in with all your other, manager responsibilities or like whatever it is that you're doing, the system is going to struggle, and it's not gonna be good. So if an organization treats incident command as a real responsibility that is worth investing in, then the quality of incident response is going to improve. All right, so next up is choosing your people. So like I mentioned, I have seen these 3 core strengths for somebody who would be a good incident commander. So number 1, communication. Incident commanders are going to move between different audiences, right? Engineering, leadership, everyone, right? And so you need to be able to explain what is happening to the system while also explaining why this matters. So this can look like saying like, hey, what is the system doing? Why should the business care? You're answering both those questions at the same time. On the sociotechnical leadership side, this is something that I think we underestimate quite a bit. It's about coordinating the organization around the system. So maybe you're pulling in a team that has missing context. Maybe you're raising a business risk that nobody has yet. Maybe it's noticing when a lot of people are thinking something and nobody's saying anything. Like all of these things are part of that leadership. Because really, the bottleneck in incidents is often not the technology, but it's the misaligned teams, the unclear ownership, the missing information. And then finally is like that managing of the cognitive load, which is a lot. Like I said, I have twin preschoolers. It's a lot to having to deal with like all the information coming in. And so the incident commander needs to be able to track all of these multiple threats and keep a coherent understanding of what's actually happening and where we stand with the response. So, you need to be able to keep this mental map of the incident. And so when somebody joins in and they're like, hey, where are we? The incident commander should be able to give that answer right away. I'm not suggesting that anyone joins an incident and disrupts the incident commander and asks, what are we doing? But the incident commander should be able to answer that question. So people who are good at this are good with ambiguity and working with partial information, which is what incidents are all about. And so one of the most common questions that I see is, how do you actually identify these people? How do you identify the people who have these core competencies within your organization? So I have two slides. One is for identifying them within your organization, and then one for outside of your organization. And like I mentioned, we do have these people within our orgs. We just haven't labeled them as incident commanders. But what I like to do is observing people doing their day-to-day work. And so let's go through these. First, how do you find those communication signals? What I like to do is look at people and how do they explain their work naturally? Do you have engineers who write really, really good summaries of their work? Do you have engineers who during stand-up are really good at explaining something that's complex? Do you have engineers who can present technical work to non-technical audience? That's a really, really big one. So these are the people who can translate complexity into clarity. Then the sociotechnical awareness. These are the engineers who are not just talking about the code. They're thinking about the impact of the code. If the service goes down, who do we need to know? Hey, we have this change going in. Let's loop in this other team because they might need to be part of this. Or, we're in the US, but Europe, they're working right now. Things like that, right? Like they're thinking about the system beyond the technical side of things. They understand that engineering decisions matter and they exist within a larger organizational context. And then finally is, how do we manage the cognitive load? And so you will often see this during like very busy debugging sessions. You'll have engineers who like really, really thrive in the environment, right? Like they're jumping from like logs to metrics to Slack to like just a ton of things. And they're not losing track of what's happening. They're like writing things down and they can even summarize what they're seeing, right? Like, hey, this is where we are so far. And so this instinct to recreate a narrative is pretty strong IC behavior. I've seen this at my company, right? Earlier in my career, we had an engineer who was really, really great during our retrospectives at like going up to the whiteboard and explaining what was happening. I was like, I don't know anything of this, but now I do. And then they came to me and they're like, hey, I'm making this change. I don't know who this is going to impact, but I need to know. So that's like a good signal that they're thinking outside of just the technical side of things. And then, during their day-to-day, they were able to switch back and forth from different tasks. So to me, that was a no-brainer. This person had the skills that would make a good incident commander. Now, what happens when you decide to look outside of your organization? So this one's a little bit more difficult because you're not able to observe them during their day-to-day work. So this is where you're like interviewing people. And I will do the caveat that I do believe in believing people when they tell me that they have the experience of being an incident commander. I will also say that I had never been an incident commander until somebody hired me to do this because, I don't know, they thought I had the right vibes. So I think it's important to give younger, more junior people a chance. So these are the kind of things that I do when I'm trying to hire somebody. So for communication, one exercise that I like to do is I give them an incident report, I give them an incident timeline, and I ask them to write me updates. One for engineers, one for leadership, one for customers. And so I'm looking to see if they're accurate, if they can adapt their tone, if they can highlight what matters to their audience, and honestly, if what they're saying actually makes sense, if they can write well. On the socio-technical leadership side, a great way to do this is through some sort of tabletop or mock incident. You give them a scenario, you're saying okay, how would you delegate? How do you manage competing ideas? How do you communicate with stakeholders? And you're not looking for the correct answer, you're looking to see how they structure their response. And this is basically like playing D&D, right? I've never played D&D, but one of our tech leads is really good at it, so I trust them. It doesn't even have to be a technical scenario, right? I've done this with my friends. I'm say you're the bachelor and you have to choose somebody, but you got all these people giving you information. What do you do? So yeah, and then finally, cognitive load management. So how do you process incomplete information without becoming overwhelmed? And this is another one where I give people a incident timeline for something that they don't know, and then I ask them to talk me through it, right? What actually is happening? What matters? What should happen next? And so this is revealing how they handle ambiguity and complexity. Oh no, I'm almost out of time. Okay. I'll go fast. So once you've identified your potential ICs, you need to onboard them. That's super duper critical. So you have to teach them the basics, and then you need to get them to do the actual work. When it comes to basics, give them clear role expectations, basic technical and system knowledge, and basic business knowledge. They need to know kind of what's up. It's really important to tell people what their job is and what their job is not. That's a big one. When it comes to actually getting them to do the work, what I like to do is do a mix of shadowing, reverse shadowing, and then having them run incidents with support. Shadowing allows them to observe experienced incident commanders. Reverse shadowing allows them to try it out while also knowing that if they fail, they have somebody else to help them. And then providing the backup that helps them build their confidence. And so, we say guidelines. I don't mean templates. I mean, when you have somebody starting out, it's okay to give them tools. It's okay to give them their, incident bot. It's okay to give them a template, hey, maybe there's other things that you need to think about. You give this to them so that eventually they develop their own way of doing things. And eventually they become comfortable and they develop how they want to be an effective incident commander, because not two incident commanders are going to be doing the same thing. All right, so how is that working out? This is maybe 4, right? So let's go back to the story that I started with, right? My 20s, it was chaotic. I thought it meant that I was good at my job, which I think I was good at my job, right? And I still have a job, so must be a good thing. But the system was fragile. The technical system, sure, but really the organizational system around incidents. If one person has to be awake, available, and capable for all incidents, that's not resilience. It's a single point of failure. So you have to change that. And so what we did is we built our dedicated team of incident commanders and we trained them. We trained them intentionally. And we created processes, shadowing, reverse shadowing, the tooling, our bots, our guidelines, so that now when our systems fail, we can coordinate better, we can be more predictable, and nothing just falls on one person. And I didn't do this alone. We had a really great team, had really great bosses who supported me, who understood what we needed to do to get creative around this. That shift made, this is me now, with some Botox. That shift made the biggest difference. We stopped thinking about incident command as one size fits all. It's really a leadership role inside complex systems, and that needs to be tackled with creativity. And once you make that shift, you start doing things differently. You start choosing your ICs differently. You start training them differently. You support them differently. And incident response becomes this capability for your organization, not just a role that you assign because this person is on call. Really quickly, what happened to us is we had a catalyst, more products, more acquisitions. And so we see a lot of incidents. We realize hey, this is not sustainable. We need to look somewhere else. Let's spread the wealth. We try to get people from other teams. We tried the volunteer thing. The quality of response dipped. So then, you actually needed to make it part of the job description. We have looked outside. We crafted our job descriptions using more socio terms than your technical terms. We based our interviews on real life scenarios. And really important, we were completely honest about what this role was like, because everyone has different ideas of what an SRE is. And if you just want to write code, like, awesome, good for you, but this is not the team for you. You're not gonna be happy, and that's fine. We want somebody who understands that this is a mix, and that sometimes your workday is going to be interrupted by an incident, sometimes it's going to get chaotic, but we do believe in being a learning from incidents culture. So in the last 15 seconds, if you get anything out of this, incidents are not technical failures, they're sociotechnical events. Incident commanders are the people who help your organization navigate that complexity, help communicate clearly, help coordinate people effectively. People with those skills certainly exist. Our challenge is really recognizing them. It's giving them the support that they need to succeed. Because the goal is not to just create heroes, it's to create a system where we don't need them. So thank you.